What's up? I'm Alex. I sing in the band Undeath from Rochester, New York. Let's see. That's a good question. If we're talking metal albums that changed my life, I would have to go with None So Vile by Cryptopsy. Just because when I heard it, I was familiar with death metal in a kind of rudimentary way. I was introduced to, like, the thrashier stuff, and None So Vile just completely changed my perspective of what that kind of music could sound like, because it kind of has nothing to do with thrash metal, and so much of the early death metal albums have everything to do with thrash metal. And the album is just so, like, balls to the wall, chaotic the entire time. Like, Lord Worm's vocals on it are just nuts. And specifically, I mean, the introductory riff to Slit Your Gus just was a complete mind melter for me. So that would be my answer to that for sure. Well, skull crushing death metal is 4 words, so that's not gonna work. I would say, like, sick death metal. I'd say late high school. Junior, senior year of high school is when I started really getting into metal, specifically like death metal and black metal, grindcore in a huge way. Uh, it was a lot of the entry level stuff. It was a lot of like Napalm Death, Cannibal Corpse, bands, and those are different bands, but the bands that are often, like, grandfathered down to aspiring metalheads, those are the ones that really got me into it. So those were huge bands for me, especially like Scum from Enslavement era. Napalm was massive, especially just like the way that they approached writing music and their attitude toward everything was pretty impactful for me early on. But I'd say 16, 17, 18 is when I never looked back. The evolution, I don't know. I don't really. I think I'm just always excited to hear bands doing this specific style of music well. Like, that's what I'm more. That's what excites me more. Like, when bands push the boundaries and do stuff that's genre bending, that's cool. I definitely appreciate it, but I guess I've always been the kind of person that really enjoys when bands can execute one thing really well. So any and all of the bands right now that are just playing death metal and doing it really well, I mean, and there's so many of them, that just gets me stoked about where the genre is. I think we're just trying to be, like, the best undeath that we can be, you know? Like, we're not really sitting down and having a lot of heady conversations about, like, where the music is gonna go and what we can do to strategize doing things differently. And that's, if bands are doing that, that's fine. More power to them. I have nothing but respect for that. But for us, it's just like we kind of from the jump have known exactly what we've wanted to do. And I feel like every release that we do, whether it's an EP or a full length, it's just we're incrementally trying to do that better. And I feel like that's what we've been doing so far. I think when it's at its best, the metal community at large can be very supportive. It can be very enthusiastic about what other people within the scene are doing. And I think at its worst, it can be, just super judgmental and nitpicky and, yeah, crossed-armed and just kind of bitter and pitiful. But thankfully these days, I mean, you don't really see that too much in real life. I mean, it's still rampant over the internet, but when you go to shows and hang out with people, people are by and large very supportive of stuff that's going on in their local scenes, and they're just enthusiastic to see good music. So I think metal especially has that going for it, where if you're a band that plays anything that sounds remotely like metal, you pretty much have a built-in audience of a certain number of people who, even if they don't like it, ultimately are going to, at the very least, come and check out what you're doing because they know that they like metal. Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about metal those are your people, like, that's your tribe. Like, even if this dude is into I don't know, like, progressive slamming brutal death metal, and this guy's into, like, exclusively hyper cult Norwegian black metal shit, like, you kind of have that common bond no matter what. I don't know, I wish I could predict the future and say exactly what's going to happen, but I mean, if you look at the past, especially in death metal, there was such a huge influx of hyper technical, very sterile technical death metal bands going on, and then I feel like that kind of naturally lent itself to what's happening right now, where bands are slowing down and simplifying and kind of distilling the formula into something a little bit more palatable. And I guess what I would like to see going forward is all the bands right now that are really focused on kind of just playing slow, groovy, very straightforward death metal, taking it one step further. And now that they have the pace right, and now that they know that they don't need to be going 300 BPM every second, if they started actually working on like writing hooks and writing really good choruses and just placing a stronger emphasis on songwriting, because I feel like that's almost a lost art form, especially in metal. And I would love to see bands actually creating like good metal songs, you know? It's made a positive impact in my life because, I mean, as intense as it sounds, it kind of gives me something to look forward to. You know, like I have plenty of interests and activities and hobbies that I'm into outside of metal, but especially, I mean, specifically with Undeath, like just being able to put my heart and soul into making this band happen for the past 2.5 years, and going out and seeing people actually respond to it positively has been massive, just for like my state of mind, you know. So that's been huge. And even if, you know, in an alternative timeline that we're doing Undeath and nobody gave a shit and we were playing to nobody everywhere we went, which, you know, I would still be fine with that, just honestly, because I would be doing something that nourished me creatively, and that's kind of the best thing that you can hope for in any sort of creative or artistic pursuit, is doing something that nourishes your soul. You know, as kind of heady as that sounds, it's true, and in that sense, it's impacted my life immensely positively. I think perseverance is the key, you know, because although, and I'm just talking about Undeath, you know, specifically here, because that's my frame of reference for everything, is, you know, nothing happens overnight. And I know Undeath hasn't really been around for that long, so it can kind of seem like a lot of things happen to us immediately, which in a sense they kind of did. You know, a lot of very cool things have occurred in the world of our band very fast, which I'm eternally grateful for. But before that, I mean, we're talking 10 years, maybe a little bit more, of everybody in Undeath trying to make different shit work. And sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't. Nothing has nearly worked as well as this band has. And like I said, I'm super grateful for that. But the important thing is just don't stop trying. You know, because you're going to have people that don't give a shit about what you do at all and never will, and you're going to have people who are going to support you from day one. But the important thing is, just through all the ups and downs and trials and tribulations of being in a band, you know, you're going to be eating a lot of shit. You're going to be making no money for a long time. You just got to keep going, because if it's a passion for you, and if it's something that you care about, you know, it's going to pay off if you're just doing what you love. Just the personal connection that you make with people, you know, because when you're booking things and when you're working in a band on a more, like, I don't know what better way to say it than just like quote unquote like professional level, there's so much shit that happens behind the scenes that you have no input in or say in whatsoever. And sometimes that's cool, because there's a lot of shit about booking stuff DIY that's, you know, always going to be so stressful and expensive. You know, you're going to go broke, but several times over. I have. But the cool thing about DIY is that you actually get face-to-face interactions with everybody that you're dealing with, and you can know right off the bat whether or not your art, your music, is going to be taken care of, if it's going to be in the right hands. And when you're 3 steps removed from that, sometimes you don't really know if somebody's trying to fuck you over. But in DIY, you can kind of tell immediately, like, this guy's a scumbag or this guy's cool. So I would say, and, you know, even the negatives aside, just getting to meet people, just getting to meet friends, and seeing people that you otherwise would never have interacted with because they live in Boise, Idaho, or Santa Monica or some shit, and turns out they have the exact same tastes and interests as you, and you've made a lifelong friend just based off of like one very simple thing. Just money. You know, there's not enough money. I think artists aren't being fairly compensated for the work that they do. And that's such a loaded thing to say. I know, there's so many factors and variables that play into that, but the long and short of it is that when you start releasing music on a more like widespread scale, especially with labels and with agencies and stuff, the vast majority of bands are getting royally fucked over, just in terms of uh, their share of the revenue and their share of royalties and you know uh, publishing and everything that you could actually stand to make an income through. People are getting shafted on, and I think that if the music industry as we know it is going to survive in any meaningful way in the model that we are familiar with, like that has to change, because it's no longer sustainable at all to go out and make a living making music if you're signed to a huge label, because they're taking generously 80% of your life's work. So you gotta just be careful, protect your neck, make sure that you're not getting screwed over by people.